Oh, Hannah, thank you for joining us today on the Communicative Leader. I'm really excited to learn more about your work. And one thing that I love that you do is you often compare workplace fairness to the way children ask, essentially like, how do you play on the playground? So, for the leader who thinks their workplace is already fair because they follow the law, what are they missing about unwritten rules?
Well, it's about more than just following the law. It's about the relationship. And there could be unwritten rules
Hmm.
that people don't know about, which is why when I talk about, children, it's funny that you mentioned that. They're very upfront about wanting to know, how do you play? And if
Hmm.
somebody doesn't give them the right information, you'll hear people say cheater really quick. And when they get
Yep.
really annoyed, they'll take their ball and go home. In the
Hmm.
workplace, we can't be quite so blunt.
Yep.
We'll get
Hmm.
fired, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean we're not thinking it because
Hmm.
deep down inside, we understand when we haven't been treated fairly. I mean, it's
Mhm.
very very
Yep.
innate, and so it's those unwritten rules that really do define workplace culture. And it's more than just about the law because ethics, for
Mhm.
example, takes it to a whole nother level, and not everything that is um, unethical is illegal. And so
Mhm.
there's a whole nother
Yep.
another sphere that can
Yeah.
be unfair.
Yeah, exactly, and you're right, I think people are really savvy, even if they're not aware of these rules, the unwritten ones, we recognize when we are getting less or maybe we're getting more work than others, but we're pretty good at kind of keeping our eye and figuring out what we see as being equitable.
Hmm. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And when we see someone being treated unfairly, even if it's not us,
Mhm.
our little antenna goes up, and we're like, oh,
Exactly.
why? And could I be next? And can I
Yep.
trust, this relationship? And so
Mhm.
it has kind of a spiraling effect that people need to be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. That was part of my dissertation work a million years ago
Oh,
was,
really?
yeah, so I study leader member relationships, but I did an experiment. We were looking to see if we manipulated, performance evaluations, and in some cases, we'd hear this fictional peer did really well, but then we look at their performance evaluation from the shared leader, and it didn't match this output, and people spoke up. People were really it was the same level of frustration if I saw that you were treating it unfairly as if I myself were being treated unfairly.
Yeah, recognition is really one of those. It's a really big basket, but
Yeah.
it falls into that unwritten rule category. How people are
Mhm.
recognized directly, indirectly,
Mhm.
and it's not just what leaders say. It can be their
Mhm.
body language, whether somebody is acknowledged
Yep.
when they walk in the room or walk down the hall, or whether they're just ignored.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, it's important.
Yeah. And that leads us to this idea of engagement. And I know that we see trillions of dollars lost to disengagement globally on an annual basis. And Hannah, I'm wondering, why do these traditional methods of improving behavior or these culture initiatives, why do they usually fail to address that core issue of fairness?
Well, to put it bluntly, because they're half baked.
Mhm.
To
Yep.
me, it's an incomplete
Mhm.
solution. It's like trying to bake a cake with two ingredients when you really need five.
Okay.
And so you're not going to get the result. And then,
Mhm.
the organization gets frustrated and like, oh, this doesn't work. And they just go back to the default. And
Mhm.
nobody's happy. And if anything, the employees are frustrated, like, yeah, they talk a good game, but they don't mean it because the leadership is disconnected, as you said,
Mhm.
from the
Yep.
employees and what's really, really needed. And if I can boil it down, I'd say they need to stop treating it as a transaction and
Yep.
treat it more as a
Mhm.
social contract, as these are
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
and people have
Yep.
human needs. People have
Yep.
human needs. And when they're not met, then things are not as strong as they could be.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that will connect nicely. I want to learn more about the five betrayals. I know your research identifies five common workplace norms that betray fairness.
Yeah.
And You don't have to name them all. You're welcome to. But I'm wondering, in your experience, what is one of these hidden norms that leaders unknowingly reinforce that damages relationships or chemistry of teams?
Well, I think there are two categories
Hmm.
really. And most of it boils down into poor conflict management. People
Hmm.
don't like conflict, and I understand it. It's
Yep.
awkward. If you have
Hmm.
to confront somebody, oh my God, they may have an emotional breakdown.
Yep.
They may cry, they may yell, they may scream. I mean,
Hmm.
what do you do, right? And so
Yep.
people avoid it. And the thing is, when you avoid it, it gets worse because the
Hmm.
underlying issue hasn't been
Yeah.
addressed, it hasn't been
Hmm.
resolved. And so it just creates more frustration and pushes people further apart instead of bringing them together. I
Hmm.
think there's just never enough we can learn about how to manage conflict, how to recognize it before
Hmm.
it metastasizes and
Yep.
becomes impossible. So I think that
Hmm.
is really important because the other issue that goes hand in hand with that is accountability. And
Hmm.
it's not just something that should roll downhill, it also rolls uphill. Accountability is a two-way
Yep.
street. To be able to
Yep.
say, hopefully in a safe environment, um, we've got a problem. You're not giving me the support I need. You're,
Hmm.
talking down to me in front of my reports. So now
Hmm.
I'm losing credibility. You say one thing, then you do another. I mean, to be able to have those kind of difficult
Hmm.
conversations in a safe space.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to self awareness. And I know that, Hannah, one of your pillars is rebuilding trust with more self awareness. And I'm wondering, from a communication perspective, how does a leader's lack of awareness, maybe it's about their own power dynamics, maybe it's about the way that they verbally communicate, as you mentioned before, maybe they're not good at acknowledging their team members when they come in. But how does all of that lack of awareness end up impacting the environment in terms of fairness or unfairness from an employee perspective?
Well, I think awareness, there's different levels of awareness, and
Hmm.
self-awareness is certainly um, huge, and how people present themselves. You know,
Hmm.
uh, do they come across as bringing energy in the room that's warm and open, or we're having
Hmm.
a meeting and this is the agenda, and boom, 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 we go down the list and
Yep.
I do all the talking, and that creates a different type of energy in the room than,
Hmm.
hey, folks, we got a problem.
Hmm.
Here's what we know, here's what we don't know. What do you think, Dr. O?
Yeah.
Tell me what's your perspective. How does it
Hmm.
look from where you sit? Because you're in the
Yep.
organization, in the team responsibilities, you have a different perspective, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And you can do that kind of joint problem solving. So lack of awareness, self-awareness, especially when it comes to meeting management, I mean, that can tell you huge
Hmm.
things about an organization, really can.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I like that idea. We're going to go back to that accountability as a two-way street. And
Yeah.
so I know that you talk about making genuine accountability as a cornerstone. I think for many organizations, many employees, they feel like accountability is kind of wheeled around like a threat.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering, how can a leader communicate accountability in a way that feels culturally safe rather than punishment or a threat of punishment?
Well, as you mentioned, the idea of accountability is a two-way street. If
Mhm.
you want performance from your employees at a top level, then they need to have the right information. They need to have access to the right resources, and a
Mhm.
little insight into like the timeline and what's behind it all,
Mhm.
so that they can perform to the right level. And maybe you think you've told them X, Y, Z, but
Yep.
they don't know. And they're like, how am I
Mhm.
supposed to know? It's not in the air.
Yep.
I can't breathe
Mhm.
it. And so sometimes just asking the question, um, how can I help you? What do
Mhm.
you need from me to be
Yep.
successful? And see what the answer is. And if you want
Mhm.
to get even more granular, say, well, how did it go this week? What was your biggest challenge?
Mhm. Yep.
And this, it takes the pressure off of you, but you might find a bottleneck about communication between departments, or
Yep.
between somebody on the outside and the inside,
Mhm.
that maybe you can help smooth over and facilitate it so that the next time things go better and they're like, yeah, she has my back, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. I can go to them
Yep.
for help,
Mhm.
right? So I think that would assist that.
Yeah, I really do love that, and I think too, I think so many people underestimate the power of asking questions.
Yes, and they may be afraid to ask questions, especially if they're in a leadership
Mhm.
position. Too
Mhm.
often, there's an assumption that they're supposed to have all the
Mhm.
answers, when in
Yep.
reality, they need to have all the questions. You
Exactly, exactly.
know?
Yep, yep. I still remember, I think it was my first master's class. We were just being obnoxious, brand new MA students, and peppering this professor with questions. And then there was one point, and he had all these answers. And then
Mhm.
someone's like, what if you don't know? He's like, I will tell you I don't know, and I will look it up for their next meeting. And it was
There you go.
just so simple and so profound. And it had never occurred to me that the professor might not have the answer.
Right.
And it's just really stuck with me like decades later. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That's a great way to
Mhm.
handle it, to say, you know, we don't know. This is what we know. This is
Mhm.
what we don't know. And here's how we have to find out about it, you know. And if anybody
Yeah.
else has ideas, just jump in. What's the quick way to do it? And AI
Exactly.
is not the answer.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Gosh. So this question in preparing made me think of being a child, and now as I mentioned, I have littles. This life isn't fair. It isn't fair. That rebuttal. So, when you encounter a skeptical executive says, "I'm here to hit metrics.
Mhm.
I'm not. It's not my job to make sure life feels fair." How do you articulate that tangible ROI of fairness, um, in terms of decision velocity and retention to that skeptical leader?
Well, you know, they're absolutely right that life isn't
Mm-hmm.
fair, but
Yep.
that doesn't mean the workplace should be unfair, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I can understand, well, but it is, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But here's the leadership challenge. Leaders need to get work done through others.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you can demonstrate fairness through
Mm-hmm.
various ways, the more you grease those wheels. The more you
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate unfairness, the more you throw sand into those gears. So
Yep.
when it comes down to it, fairness is not charity.
Mm-hmm.
Fairness is smart business. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
You get more done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like that idea of leaders getting their work done through others.
Yeah.
'Cause you're right. It really is the nature of the job, and that's why I think some have such a hard time with it.
Well, it puts more on their
Mhm.
back, you know?
Yep.
I mean, redoing somebody else's report,
Mhm.
micromanaging.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, with better delegation, you increase your sphere of influence and get more done.
Mhm.
So, you
Yes.
know, it pays.
Yeah. And so, kind of a follow up to that, Hannah. So, if we are, let's say we have a titled leader listening and they realize in a conversation, maybe it's in a meeting, what is that kind of pause and pivot they can use to reestablish fairness in the moment if they realize things maybe are a little bit off kilter?
Well, that is a tough question and a very good
Mhm.
one. I think depends on the nature of the situation.
Mhm.
Is it a conversation that's suddenly getting heated and each
Mhm.
side is trying to be right? In which
Mhm.
case a timeout would be appropriate. You know, um, let's rethink this. Let's take some time for the temperature to come
Mhm.
down, and revisit the conversation and the issues at a later date. You know,
Mhm.
and even if you want to go so far as to say, why don't you write down what you think the issue is and how to solve it? And
Mhm.
I'll do the same. And then you can take the two writings and put them next to each other to see where the disconnect is, and that does it in a little bit more of an objective way than to
Mhm.
have voices escalate and get more heated and maybe start getting personal in a way that
Yep.
really damages the relationship. So a lot depends
Yeah.
on the situation, but you know, I think the worst case is when it gets kind of out of control.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. So kind of knowing when to put the brakes on, hit pause, and maybe reconvene.
Yeah, exactly. At a better
Mhm.
time, because sometimes
Mhm.
you know, the escalation is due to time pressure. I've got another
Yep.
meeting in 10 minutes. Let's get this over with. That kind
Yes.
of energy, which is
Yep.
just like Sure, pour gasoline on it. Let's see how
Yep,
that works.
yep. I'm laughing just because I'm like, "Oh, I've heard that so many times," right? It's
Yeah.
just unfortunately, you're like, "Yep,
Yeah.
it's just a
But
Monday."
it's a Monday, but the thing is though,
Yeah.
think about how disrespectful that is to the other
Yeah,
person saying, "You're not
exactly.
important. This isn't
Yep.
important. I don't care what you think." Boom. And then the
Yeah.
next time, are they going to, offer
Mhm.
suggestions or
Yeah,
no, they're going to shut down and wait for you to give them the answer because you have the answers,
exactly.
right? So,
Yeah.
if that's what you want, that's fine, but you're
Mhm.
not getting the best out of your people that way.
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna keep them that long either.
Long term, probably not.
Yeah,
Yeah, they'll
yeah.
go someplace where their
Mm,
contribution is
mhm.
respected and
Yep.
rewarded.
Yeah. Well, Hannah, I have 2 more questions for you, but before we get there, I'm wondering, we've talked about elements of your new book, but
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's some other things from the book that were either, really surprising to you in the work or, that has really struck you throughout that process.
Well, I think you put your finger on it before when you talk about management awareness
Mhm.
and the leaders that want to hit their metrics because that's what's rewarded.
Mhm.
And I
Yep.
think it's legitimate, it's
Mhm.
reasonable, but if they really want to improve the culture and elevate the performance of all their employees
Mhm.
because they spent a lot of time recruiting them,
Yeah.
hiring them,
Mm.
training
Yep.
them, and if the job wasn't important, it wouldn't exist, right?
Yep.
So, let's make the most of the talent that's on the payroll. Then
Mhm.
my recommendation and kind of, where all of this leads to is have
Mhm.
the proper incentive structures,
Yep.
not just the
Mhm.
metric of the sales. That's
Mhm.
important, yes, but think about how the sales might increase or the innovation might increase
Mhm.
if you had everybody pulling in the right direction, in the same direction. Um, so, creating incentive structures that
Mhm.
motivate managers to
Yep.
be more equitable, be more fair, providing the
Mhm.
necessary training so that they can be.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that because then we're living our values, not just posting them on a website and calling it a day, you
Yes,
know?
exactly. It's like, here's what we say, here's what we
Yeah,
do. Yeah,
yeah.
that kind of thing. And
Never
employees
the
know
2
that
shall
there's
meet.
the double
Yeah,
standards and triple
yep,
standards depending on who you are. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Hannah, my 2 final questions, these go hand in hand, and this is the way we end all episodes of the Communicative Leader. It's thinking about, the first part is for our titled leaders, our managers, our supervisors, directors. What is the communication or leadership tip or challenge or piece of advice? And then the second question, the related question is, what do you want to leave employees across all ranks in terms of that tip, challenge, or advice related to leadership or communication?
Oh my. Oh my. That covers a lot of
Mhm.
ground.
Mhm.
um, my tip to leaders would
Mhm.
be to take a deep breath and be curious.
Mhm.
Ask questions of your employees, all kinds of questions. And at the same time, be as humble as you can because you might not like the answer. And
Mhm.
if you don't, treat it
Yep.
as a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity, either to clarify,
Yep.
why they
Mhm.
have a particular reaction or to make an improvement. Because,
Yep.
if they care, they'll tell you. It's when they sit
Yep.
back and they go, I don't know, everything's fine. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm like, that's when you've got somebody who just doesn't want to deal with conflict, who doesn't
Yeah.
trust you, and is partially checked out. They may still be doing a great job, but
Yep.
you're not tapping into their full potential,
Yeah. Yep.
and that's a frustration. As far as employees across the board, um, yes, you may encounter
Mhm.
situations that you feel are unfair,
Mhm.
where you don't think you've been treated right. And so, my suggestion to that is talk to somebody whose opinion you trust.
Mhm.
Have a sounding board. I think it's so important to have that kind of third party, either
Mhm.
validation or reality check,
Mhm.
that says,
Yep.
Hannah, I think you're overreacting. Maybe
Yep.
that's a one-off situation. On the other hand, if it's a
Mhm.
pattern, if it's crossed a legal line, then maybe you
Yeah.
want to consult a lawyer in
Yep.
your locale who specializes in that area, not the
Mhm.
one who did your speeding ticket. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All
Yep.
right. So that would be a suggestion. And,
Mhm.
also stay true to your values, because
Mhm.
if you keep compromising them, eventually it not only affects your performance, because it's harder and harder and harder to keep doing the same job at that high level, when you feel
Mhm.
that you've been treated unfairly,
Yep.
when you haven't been recognized, when people are humiliating you, and you're still
Mhm.
supposed to have that smile on your face and move forward.
Mhm.
It affects your self-esteem to the point where it's even tough to interview for another job when you feel
Mhm.
so beat down.
Yep.
So don't let yourself get to that situation. Keep your resume
Mhm.
updated. If you feel that you've been
Mhm.
treated unfairly, stay true to your values, because it will affect your health. So
Yeah.
that's my suggestion.
Yeah, and it's so helpful. When I was listening, I was thinking about how kind of humility under is like an undercurrent of both. And I like that you raise it up, especially with the leader, because you're right. Sometimes we ask questions, we don't get answers that we were hoping for or expecting.
Hmm.
Maybe not answers that we really want to receive. But as you said, to lean into humility, to be humble. Like you said, if someone isn't going to share this, there's cost with an employee speaking up and sharing things, particularly about their manager's style. And
Yes.
then I think for our employees too, when you talk about that trusted sounding board, that sometimes we might hear, maybe we let this one rest.
Right.
Maybe this reaction isn't necessarily um as damaging as you anticipated. So I think that's so important.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
Yeah. Well, Hannah, thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm really excited to read your new book. I appreciate that the work that you're doing. And again, thanks for being a guest on the Communicative Leader.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Excellent.